Hi everybody, Don the camera guy here. I don't normally get in front of a camera for obvious reasons, but I make an exception here because I just finished editing the very first part of our three-part series on Trevor Jacob, and I just felt like I had something to say. Like many of you, the first time I ever heard of this guy was after he jumped out of his airplane and crashed it into the mountains. And like many of you, my first thought was, what an idiot. Why would you do that? No way this was an accident. This was staged. And now we all know that it was, in fact, staged. And I just thought, what a dunce. And I read many comments online about this guy, and many of you thought the exact same thing. Okay. Well, I just spent a lot of time with the guy, and, you know, I was left with a different impression. I was left with the impression that this was a guy who did something stupid, and for him, in his life experience, it didn't seem out of the norm. And when he did it and it caused him some grief, he kind of started to piece it together and figured out, yeah, he'd made a mess of things. And for those of you who comment on his smirk, from the moment I met him, he was smiling. To the time I got back in the plane and left, he was still smiling. We're talking about a guy who's just genuinely happy with life. He's not arrogant. He's not conceited. Whatever else you may think about him, those were not the impressions I got after talking to him and spending time with him. What I got was, here was a guy who did something stupid and wishes he hadn't. So I hope you'll watch all three parts. It was an excellent interview. Thanks for your time. Hope you enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Mark from Skywagon University, and today we're down in Lompoc, and we're going to have a detailed chat with Trevor Jacob to find out the inside, full, everything story about what happened with the Tayorcraft. But first, I've just got to tell you something that I can hardly believe it myself. I came down here, I've known you, for 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
And I sold you that 172,
Yep.
and you hurt your back, and you sold the 172. And then I heard somebody jumped out of a Tayorcraft. And then years go by, and then I get a call from a guy who wants to sell a Rans S21. And I'm flying down here with my buddy to get me here. And on the way down, we're saying, oh, that guy jumped out of that Tayorcraft, and we're pointing down into the hills and wondering why we were talking about, you know, how that happened. And then we arrive here, and I asked you something about it, and you said, that was me. And I didn't know.
Yeah.
I thought, what? And the guy I was with, Greg, he said, we were talking about that just now in the plane, and now this is Trevor. It's okay. So then we set up an opportunity for Trevor, who's been through it all, and it's been rough. He's been through it all, and he's going to now do 3 chats. One will be about what happened, how you got into it, what you did, and the last one, what happened because of it. So tell us firstly about, you've always been into extreme sports and other activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, this is the first time I got out of federal prison about 3 months ago now. This is the first time I've talked to anybody about it at all. So
thanks.
It's the first time kind of sharing what I've learned and the whole experience from start to finish. So, and honestly, it's such unique coincidence, even though I don't believe in coincidences, as far as just originally buying my first plane from you and then selling it through somebody with you again. By the way, Mark, incredible plane sales broker, everything aircraft related, but and then reaching back out for the anyway, it's just been a crazy ride. So the first interview with you is a treat and also really
Thanks.
unique.
And we're down here. We're at Lompoc. We came down here to interview Trevor here.
Yeah.
Because going up there and doing everything, it was quicker and easier. We just come down and see you.
Yeah. So
give us a little bit of your background. You've
Sure.
always been into the extreme stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just kind of been, just kind of really energetic, wild, adventurous kid. And I grew up in Mammoth Lakes, so in California here. And, if I wasn't in school, I was either on the ski resort or out in the woods with my friends. And,
the way a kid should be.
Yeah, and my parents are just like, get out of here, go play, go ride your bike, go skateboarding, go fishing. So I really lived an outdoor survivalist style childhood where we would just, go and live in the, like, literally,
So normal people's limits were here, and your limits were here.
at a young age, like my parents are both, very accomplished adventure racers and, outdoor, they climb tons of massive mountains. And
So those
like,
things were normal.
yeah, like that's just what we were doing. My brother and I, as a kid, I was skiing at 2 years old, and I remember running into a ski pole on the lift, and my parents were snowboarding, trying to teach us to ski, and they're like, this isn't working. So I literally learned to snowboard at 3 years old. And it's kind of just like I broke my foot for the first time when I was 3 years old, jumping off a bed over 10 chairs and like landed in the middle of them. So I was always a little bit on the wild side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the things that you do for that kind of fun is motorbikes, snowboarding. What are they?
Yeah, so I mean, I've really experimented kind of with all action sports, really. But growing up in Mammoth, I was exposed to, a lot of snowboarding, of course, and skateboarding and mountain biking and all just like the extreme stuff at a really high level at a very young age. So
Were you sort of like, if you were skiing, it was always off-piste. You couldn't just be on the groomed runs with everybody else. You had to look for something else.
No, for sure. Like I remember I was building jumps like to learn backflips when I was 9 years old. With no phone, nobody. I would just like sneak off from after school and just be in the woods by myself, like building these jumps and trying backflips. Super dangerous for a 9-year-old to be doing by himself, but like that was my reality. I would go and do that after school. But yeah, like, and I had a lot of injuries and a lot of like I had to learn for myself. My parents were like, we love you and we support you, but like if you go do something, you're gonna have to learn the lessons of life on your own.
Yeah.
And I experienced a lot of broken bones and a lot of injuries and a lot of things at a very young age, so that kind of was like
When did you learn to fly? Were you like a renegade type of student, or how did that go?
No, I actually did that. Well, it's actually super sad. I just found out last night that the person that originally introduced me to flying was just in a super bad car accident up in Canada. He's a Squamish Valley bush pilot. But I just found out that news. But he took me flying, and I was just all around British Columbia.
How old?
This was, I was like 23. I'm 31 now, so I was like 23 or 24, and I was just like, how have I not done this? Like, this is insane. And of course, I've been in little planes and flown and throughout my life, and I got into skydiving at a very young age. Like as soon as I turned 18, I was skydiving. So. But then I got my license. Actually, it says my first solo on that T-shirt.
Yeah, I see it.
What does it say? 6/22/19. So 5 years ago, roughly.
Wow.
And then once I got that, I was, started flying. Yeah, I learned in that 172 conversion that you sold me.
Yeah, you learned in it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a handful, the tail dragger.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Because it's not got a lot of rudder, because it wasn't a real 172.
Right, the tail wheel chains were really tight. I guess, I don't know, like, who made them very tight, but they were super tight. And I was learning with the instructor, and I'm like, it just doesn't feel like I can't figure this out. Like, it doesn't
And you hadn't
work.
flown anything else, you didn't know.
Right, and I kept trying to steer, literally the first few times I was trying to steer with the yoke.
Oh.
And like to turn the plane, and I'm like, he's like, stop doing that. I'm like, it does. The pedals don't work, and then literally almost ground looped it, but didn't, like twice. And I'm just like, this just doesn't feel right. So I brought it over to a mechanic, and he's like, look at how tight these tail wheel chains are, and it literally wouldn't make the rudder like wasn't moving.
Oh yeah.
So it was like a rudderless plane.
In a tail dragger.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, that made you good if you learned in that.
Yeah. So then he loosened the chains, and I'm like, oh, this is how you fly. Like this makes more sense now. No problem. But yeah, that's what I learned.
And then tell us about how, with the Tayorcraft,
Yeah.
what made you do what you did?
Man, it's a very intricate. I mean, I could talk about this for a very long time, but the short version was my friend and I had this idea to do that as a bucket list goal, kind of like do this before you die type thing. And originally, when we started talking about it, well, I'll backtrack for a second and say, when I was like maybe 12 years old, 13, 14 years old, I didn't play many video games, but let's say that I got, sick for a while, or I had a broken bone or like some downtime, I would play video games, and I would play Grand Theft Auto, which is, if you have kids, probably don't let them play that game. But I was not like, I didn't play the game violently. But I would do like, oh, you can skydive in this. Oh, you can fly helicopters. Oh, you can fly planes. Like, that's cool. So I would just like mess around, drive fast cars, and play that video game. And you can do the parachute cheat code, and then you get in the plane, you fly the plane, and you're flying around. It gets kind of boring. So then you just press the triangle button on PlayStation, and then the video game character, just jumps out of the plane. And then you can pull the parachute and land in the city. That was like originally, I was like, imagine doing that in real life. But then, fast forward 20 years or however long, my friend and I were like, wouldn't that be crazy to just get a plane way out in the middle of the desert somewhere and just kind of like do this someday, clean up the everything, not even like thinking about legal, repercussions. Right. Just like, what if we did that someday? We were just talking, like you and I. And then that just kind of steamrolled into basically this whole, social media front and sponsors and money, and then like having that idea and then having lawyers involved and not actually thinking any laws were being broken. So there's a lot of details to it. But that's kind of the gist, or like the moral of the story.
But when you said, I'm going to do it, what was the thing that motivated you? What made you actually think, now I'm going to do it?
So I wrote, this is actually really unique. I always write down my goals, like just in general in my life. I've always done it since I was like 13 or 14 years old. And I'll mostly do those around my birthday. And I'm like, okay, these are my set goals for the year. Like this is what I'm going to accomplish. And, in those journals is like, go to the Olympics, become national champion on my snowboard, which, I've done those things. And not to sound like, like full of myself or anything like that, but like literally in this journal, I'm like, okay, or, do this or make this video. And literally, I think it was 29 years old or 28 years old, I just wrote, like, jump out of a plane, I'm flying solo. That was like, just in my goal. I was just like, I want to do that before I die. Like in my life, I just want to do that. And then, be careful what you wish for, people, because like I didn't think about like, oh, I'm gonna like get away with this, or I'm gonna ruin my or like whatever. Like, just I didn't think about what this would entail. I was just like, all right, somehow, some way.
You didn't think it would be as big a deal as it was.
I didn't even know at that point when I wrote that down. I didn't even have the idea of how it would all work. I was just like, okay, like I'll figure out some way to make this a reality this year. So I didn't even think about it, I just wrote it down. And then from that point, I started thinking like, okay, how could we do this? Like, just started to tool with it. And then, I mean, I'll let you talk from there, but basically there was two things that really came up. Somebody sent me a super cheap airplane for sale, a link, and was like, it was my friend that I was going to do it with.
It was this Tayorcraft.
Yeah. Right. And he was like, check this out. And it was 10 grand. And I was like, okay. And I offered them 5 just out of the blue. And they were like, yeah, we'll take 5 grand.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, maybe this is a sign this is supposed to happen. I start tooling in my head. I'm like, it's meant to be, And then, let's see. I got hit up by a sponsor that I'm not allowed to talk about, so I'd appreciate if you also don't mention their name. Obviously, it's out there, but I promised them I wouldn't talk about them anymore. But so they were like, hey, we should collaborate and whatnot, and we'd like to get involved with the video. And I'm like, oh, I have this idea, and that's kind of where it started.
You ran it by them, and they said, let's do it?
No, I didn't run it by them. Oh. That's the thing, that they have absolutely, zero responsibility whatsoever.
You said, I will do something, and they said, let's just do it.
Yeah. I was just like, I'll get something done, and they were like, yeah, you're creatively free to do whatever you want. So that was kind of the
And then just dilemma. With a bit of hindsight, how are they now with the result?
I
never spent.
Not going to comment on anything in that regard, but
okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it started. And
that's how it started.
And like, little did I know, I was literally, I mean, I'm not saying that what I did is okay at all. I think, of course, like let's say it was a stunt for a movie and it was all pre-planned and there was nothing or no, like, and you got all the permits and it was done super correctly, then like, yeah, like, okay, I don't see a real big deal with that. But, you know, to hold
So
my...
you weren't aware of the consequences, and if you had been, you wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, but also to hold myself accountable, I didn't do anything to take precautionary steps at all. You know, like I was literally like just jerry-rigged the whole thing together and just kind of went for it, which...
Like snow jumping age 9 in Mammoth without your kid, with your mum knowing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like, and that is something that has been a massive life lesson for me, just in general, that I needed to learn somewhere along my life path. And, you know, I definitely have learned my lesson. So...
Well, no, okay, so that's good. So that's the first of 3 videos. That's the how.
Okay.
Now we're going to cut this. We're going to say thank you very much for watching this. And this is Mark at Skywagon University interviewing Trevor Jacob. And if you want to see the how it was done, go to the second video. So thanks very much for watching. We've got a subscribe button here and a little button, a little bell you can click on for notifications.